Hey guys, welcome. This is Luke Humphrey with LukeHumphreyRunning.com, and I'm recording this just the first part of January 2023. So, Happy New Year! I hope you all had a great holiday and are ready to get back at it. So, one of my New Year's resolutions, well, not even resolution. I don't really like the term resolution, but just goal for the year, I guess, is to create more content. Other than just the random stuff I seemingly do, and then coaching my athletes. So start off strong, but then fade off like a miles 23 through 26 of the marathon, right? So in any case, I was hoping to post something as new SOS for so those familiar with the Hanson's Marathon Method terminology, the SOS, something of substance. I hope to produce a SOS at least once a month. That'd be pretty solid, right? Be 12 big posts a year. I think I was at 8 or 9 for 2022. So I did better, but room for improvement. So in any case, so this is the first one of 2023, and I want to talk about. Okay, so this is the first one of 2023, and I want to talk about something that I feel like runners are behind the eight ball a little bit on new things, right? Cyclists, triathletes, they're way up on the game, right? Something new comes out, they've already known about it. To runners, it's brand new, but they've known about it for a long time, and it's an interesting aspect. But so what I want to talk about today is ketone esters, and I think it's been around quite a while for cyclists, triathlon distances, the multi-day rides, the big tours in the cycling world. I feel like this stuff's been around for a little while, but it's now just like runners are just now like, well, how can it benefit us, right? And I don't know. I mean, that's the big question. We don't know. Maybe ultra runners know a little bit more, but for the typical recreational marathoner to competitive marathoner, I just feel like this is something that's been brought up a lot. So so in any case, I get down these rabbit holes, and I got down one the other day with the blogs over at My Sports Science. And if you guys know me at all, I follow those. I read a lot of their stuff that comes out, and it's pretty interesting. And if you ever want to learn anything about more about nutrition for the endurance athlete and supplementation, what's good and what's not, how to be careful, things like that, I'd really recommend just following along with mysportscience.com, or find them on Twitter or whatever your social is, and paying attention to these guys. So anyway, I came across one blog they shot out across social media, and it was do ketone. Immediately thought, wow, that'd be great if I could boost my EPO without actually taking EPO. If you know anything about EPO, that's one of the drugs by choice for endurance athletes. It's also naturally produced in the body. That's why runners go train at altitude, all these things. So it's definitely nice. And the question would be, like, could I just take something to naturally improve it? And not fail a drug test? That'd be kind of interesting, right? So, in any case, if you know anything about ketones, I know a little bit about ketones, but it's more from as a byproduct of a high fat, low carb diet, right? And so, not actually supplementation for ketones, and that's where the ketone esters come in. As I said, ketones themselves are byproducts of fat metabolism. They can be used as fuel, and that's why it's gotten a lot of attention over the last few years. Really more for not so much competitive runners, but the recreational runner. People going on the high fat, low carb bandwagon, and it's that's not something arguments over the years. I want to talk about strictly from a performance standpoint, but the fact is that ketones are known as the starvation fuel because they can fuel the brain in starvation conditions. Because ideally, glucose is what the brain is using as its fuel. And like I said, I don't want to get into the nutrition debate on the HFLC diets. But with that said, the idea of performance was that ketones could be an alternate source of fuel for endurance performance. So ketones could potentially maybe either feed the brain and preserve glucose for the muscles, or just be another source to conserve glycogen overall. And so that stored glycogen would actually last longer in a 4, 5, 6 plus hour performance. So maybe not necessarily just a marathon, but if you're an ultra runner, something like that, where it's first to finish the race, this could be something that could potentially benefit you. And so it was first thought, the first thing that was really looked at with ketones was, could it create a glycogen sparing effect? And so if so, this would be ideal because, we just mentioned it, carbohydrate ingestion has always been shown to increase performance. The faster you want to run, or, just the further you want to run, you have to have some sort of supplementation with glucose to help with what the muscles are using, right? And so, we just don't store enough to get us through. So, the idea too is like if you slow down, if you were a slower marathon or things like that, you were not using as much glycogen, which to some extent is true, but you're still using a lot. And the longer you're out there, the more that's going to play a role. And so what I looked at was the problem was that to achieve, that's the thing, right? So to achieve ketosis, where you're using the ketones as a fuel, you essentially have to starve yourself, right? It's the starvation fuel. You have to starve yourself of the carbohydrate. And so by doing that, you're drastically reducing the glycogen stores in the muscle. Cells are taking the place of that glycogen. But, what was found is that instead of actually sparing the glycogen, ketones would simply just inhibit glycogen from being utilized, whether it was from not having the amount of storage that they had before or whatever. The result was just the inability to achieve a very high level. Of performance. And so I would argue here that if a person didn't practice fueling and then drastically decreased carbohydrate intake during training, it's going to be awfully hard to then give yourself a lot of carbohydrate on race day and not experience GI issues. And from what I understand too, with ketone ester, ketones and stuff like that, you run the risk of higher GI stuff. And, I feel like you're just opening the door for a lot of other things to go wrong. And if you're left in the same boat with not enough fuel to sustain exercise at desired paces, there's just no way you can sustain that high level of performance. And so that, it would seem, would be the end of the idea of ketones as a supplemental fuel. However, if there were a way to take ketones without inhibiting the carbohydrate intake, so if you could take the ketones and still have what we were looking at, and that's where ketone esters come in. It's just essentially the ketone supplement that would help mimic the effect of ketosis, but without drastically reducing the amount of carbohydrate you take in your diet. And unfortunately, the jury's still out with these as a fuel. The results were what I already mentioned, basically was non-productive. And limited performance. But, still, you can say the jury's out. But to be fair, the studies I looked at were based on 30 to 60-minute time trials. But extrapolating that out to a 3 to 4 hour marathon, a person is still running at a fairly high level of carbohydrate. So where does that crossover occur, right? Where ketones are beneficial? Is it for, an ultra marathon? Is it for a multi-day race like a Ragnar or something like that? Is it for an Ironman, a bike tour, a 100-mile run? I honestly don't know, and I don't know where that information is. I haven't seen it. And ketone esters themselves, and when you take the ketones during exercise, GI issues seem to be fairly common. So we have a problem where, if you've gone the route of low carbohydrate and then try to supplement with carbohydrate on race day, you're going to have GI issues. If you've gone high on carbohydrate and want to supplement with, you're going to have GI issues. If you've gone high on carbohydrate and want to supplement with ketone esters, you run the risk of GI issues. So the reality is, how practical is this for a high-performing athlete who's looking to be able to use a high level of carbs, but also, maybe get a small benefit from those ketone esters. And it's really the risk reward there. I don't know if it's there or not, right? And so now can we say are ketone esters done? Like, are we saying that there's no use for them? And not exactly, right? And I'm not going to argue with ultras and stuff like that, because that's a whole new world too. That's doubling up to, there's 200-mile races now. Like, so I don't know. When you get way out there like that, who knows, right? There might be some benefit from it. I don't want to discount that. But for the typical marathoner in the 3 to 5 hour range, I don't know if there's a ton of benefit for that, right? So jumping back on path here. Are ketone esters done as far as a supplementation for the endurance athlete? And by that, I mean a marathoner and faster or shorter distance. And not exactly, right? So this is going back to the original title, do ketone esters boost EPO? And what these guys were talking about was that people on specific diabetic drugs have been shown to have increased ketone bodies, right? Now, limitations in diet, but the drugs themselves had increased ketone bodies. And on top of that, they had increased red blood cell mass with hematocrit and hemoglobin. And people on low carb diets also show these characteristics. We're having their increased red blood cell mass. So that's pretty interesting, right? Not yet. You're not interested in that yet? If not, then understand that the main hormone for increasing red blood cell is EPO. And now, if you went out and shot yourself up with a drug, that's definitely illegal. You cannot do that. That's not good. It's not a good thing to do. And it's super expensive too. However, that's why people go to altitude. That's why they used to buy altitude tents back in the day. I don't know how popular altitude tents are now anymore. But that's what they did. You would live in your tent and then go train low. That's why people go to Flagstaff. That's why people go to Boulder. All those things, right? So that's why they go out there. And so increasing your EPO isn't necessarily illegal. It's just you're not supposed to inject yourself with anything. And altitude training, like I said, altitude training stimulates EPO naturally. Exercise itself, the right workout, will actually stimulate EPO as well. And so all that combined became the question, will ketone esters promote EPO production? And so that's what they wanted to look at. So this was a small scale study. It was really a proof of concept study, just because ketone esters are expensive. And if you want to go long-term, big scale, it's going to cost a lot of money. So you want to make sure that it's even viable to recognize that it might work before you go all in on a study like that. So in any case, the study looked at did 1 hour of cycling intervals. And this is the type of workout that would naturally stimulate EPO production. So kind of combine the factors there. Afterwards, some drank a carb and protein recovery drink, while others drank the same drink, but with ketone esters. And what they found was that EPO levels were about 20% higher in the group that ingested the ketone esters in the recovery drink. So essentially, it was the same as training at 2,000 meters altitude, more than a mile high, right? That'd be higher than Denver. So that's potentially huge, right? And so I think that's something that they proved the proof of concept. And I think that's the next step, is that they want to go, now, what does that do long term? And obviously more subjects would be good as well. But before we get too excited, I think there are some downsides. One, we don't know how long that this effect lasts. If it's short term, how often do you have to replicate? So in other words, do I have to take this cocktail every day, or can I do it after every workout? Can I do it a couple times a week? We don't know, right? That's a big question. Do you have ideally they did it after a hard workout, and they saw the benefits of that. So I think, personally, I would really want them to look at, like, okay, if I did a workout that would stimulate EPO production naturally, can I boost that natural production by doing this recovery drink after those workouts, and not necessarily worry about just doing it after an easy day or something like that. It naturally takes weeks to see changes in the blood. So if you only do it here and there, what's the effect going to be? do you have to do like a loading dose, right? That might be a question. Do you have to do a loading dose and then you can space it out or take a smaller amount? Those are all questions we have to do. The second part to that is that the ketone esters are really expensive. So I'm looking at the feed website right now, and a 25 pack of little shots of ketone esters, like if you ever take like an energy shot or something like that, that's all it is. This is called Delta G. It's 25 grams per bottle, and it's a 25 pack. It's $7.50, and that's not $7.50. That's $750 to take for that. That's going to basically last you a month. Now they do have a subscribe and save thing, and I don't know. I think it's interesting for sure. I think it's worth looking at longer term and looking at some of those things we talked about. If you're an aspiring runner and you don't have access to move to altitude, you don't necessarily want to buy an altitude tent, whatever the case is. I mean, although after 10 months of taking this, you could probably buy an altitude tent as well. So I don't know. It's interesting, but I don't know if practically and financially it's viable for somebody. And honestly, if you're a 4-hour marathoner and you want to drop $750 a month on this, I don't know if that's a better. I don't know what's a better investment. Honestly, you could buy 3 pairs of, carbon plated shoes and get 3% per improvement just from that, right? So I don't know. That's the thing, right? Like how practical is it really going to be? So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future, and hopefully they have a long-term study established. But I mean, if it does, and you've got the cash, it might be worth something, or if you're, like I said, I think the aspiring runner, you really just you don't have a sponsorship, you don't have a lot of resources at your hand, you can't move to altitude. Maybe this is something where it can give you just enough of an edge to make you put it more on an even playing field as somebody who has been at altitude for months and months and months. So, but with that, I mean, the more I look at it and more at the cost factor and stuff, gosh, I just don't know. I mean, because I'll tell you one of my goals, and I didn't really want to go too much into my goals, but one of my goals for 2023 would be to get back. 2022 was a pretty rough year for me running wise. I'd really like to get into a more competitive state, really compete at the masters level, maybe do something a little bit bigger. And so I'm looking at like, man, that's I definitely can't go to altitude. I don't have the time or ability to just go to live in Flagstaff or Boulder for a few months at a time. And so this might be something where I look at, but right now it's an awful tough sell. But it'd be, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens on these future studies, if they can see where, if you can just take it, after a hard work recovery drink, and you could do that for a few months and see some pretty significant results, then it would be something you could really look at. And so, yeah, I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was a rabbit hole you can go down to. If you're listening to this, go back to the actual blog post, and I have the links to all 3 of the sportscience.com, and you can look at those yourself and draw your own conclusions. So with that, again, welcome to 2023, and I hope it's a great year for all of you, and hopefully you'll have more content from me throughout the year. So with that, I will talk to you later, and we'll see you.